Okay, well, again, I want to welcome everybody to our virtual conference today, and we have a great presentation lined up here with three wonderful and knowledgeable speakers who are very active in the local food scene. So we're going to go through, and everybody's going to do sort of a brief introduction and little presentation, and then we'll move on to more general questions after that. So we're going to kick it off with Ryle Carver.
Thank you. Let me just get myself situated here. So Joanna, you can see the slides?
Yes,
great.
I can. Perfect.
Excellent. Okay. So yeah, my name is Ryle Carver, and I'm a program manager with the Rural Grocery Initiative, which is housed at Kansas State University. We're part of K-State Research and Extension, so we work across the state of Kansas. And the Rural Grocery Initiative came about after a series of listening sessions occurred in rural communities across the state. And rural residents really identified that the vibrancy and viability of their rural grocery stores was a concern for them. And so the Rural Grocery Initiative was born, and the initiative spends time supporting rural grocery stores, assisting communities and key stakeholders in both rural grocery operations, and we have a focus also on on increasing access to healthy food. And so what does the Rural Grocery Initiative do? We are a technical assistance organization, which really just means we're here to have conversations with community members and stakeholders and business owners and sort of troubleshoot challenges, think through strategies and next steps. So anything related to rural retail, healthy food access, the broader sort of food system, at least in Kansas, we can generally point you to the right person if we don't know it on our own. So we have a wealth of information on our website. We are engaged with community partners across the state and the country. And we also serve as a food access organization for the Kansas Healthy Food Initiative. And the Kansas Healthy Food Initiative isn't really what I want to focus on today during this session, but I did just want to mention that it is a program within our office, and the goal of the Kansas Healthy Food Initiative is to increase access to healthy food in low resource and underserved areas of Kansas. And the focus is really on increasing access at the retail level. So we do that through technical assistance and financing. And there's more information on our website. I've also got the email here. And just to highlight that this program, while it focuses on the retail level, it is available. It does work with producers, anyone that's really working in that retail space. And so Tecklenburg Farms is one of our success stories that we've written about a funded project. And they built a packing shed with some of the dollars from Kansas Healthy Food Initiative. So but back to sort of Rural Grocery Initiative work. So one of these sort of flagship resources that our office developed is what we call the Rural Grocery Toolkit. And this is on our website, and it has a range of resources to help grocers either establish a store, or it may be available. There are resources available for those that already have a store and want to make some improvements. So this is a really helpful resource. And one of the more recent technical assistance activities that we have been working on has actually been a webinar series. And this was an 8-part webinar series that happened earlier this year. And the focus was on supporting businesses and business transitions. So helping grocers understand or start thinking about a transition plan. And this topic, I think the demographics of rural grocers and the trends in demographics for local producers are fairly similar. It's an aging population, and so this transition planning topic is really important and relevant right now. So I wanted to mention it today just because I think that each of these topics represent kind of a different phase or a different step within that transition planning process. And all of these have been recorded. So just wanted to mention that there could be some topics here that are relevant to people in the session today. Another kind of project we've been working on recently is a rural grocery survey. And so when we first started, when the Rural Grocery Initiative first got started, we had a survey where we learned about a lot of the different challenges that grocers were facing. And that kind of dictated our work. It helped us develop the Rural Grocery Toolkit. Since then, we had not done another survey. And so we were really excited to launch a similar survey this January. And we added a whole bunch of questions, some of which actually included some questions on local food purchasing in grocery stores. So the data is not fully analyzed, but I think on first glance, what I saw from some of the data that we've received is that there's room to grow for grocers and for rural grocery and local producers and local sourcing. And so I think that that's just, today, I wanted to just, before we get into the panel session, the questions, I just wanted to share a few of the ways that our office is sort of engaging in local sourcing. So as I was thinking about kind of how to frame this discussion, I was thinking, what is the connection between rural groceries and local food? And this article showed up in my email, which is really kind of an industry article from Supermarket News, but highlights that local sourcing is definitely on grocers' radars. It is seen as sort of a way to differentiate what you are offering. And so ways that Rural Grocery Initiative can support some of that local sourcing is something we're really interested in. So just from our own experiences, talking with grocers and learning from rural grocers over the years, I wanted to share just a few key considerations. So the first one is distribution. And I think similar to local food, distribution is really a challenge for rural grocers. And one of the main challenges we hear about is actually related to minimum buying requirements. So several area grocery wholesalers have some level of a minimum buying requirement stipulation. And so what that means is that a particular grocer has to meet a certain level of purchasing from them each week to be able to continue ordering from them. And the reason I mention this is that in some cases, that can actually be a detriment to the relationship with the local producer, because if a grocer is kind of right at that level of meeting a minimum buying requirement, they're going to want to put all their eggs in one basket and focus on meeting that minimum buyer requirement. And sometimes it can mean that the option to work with local producers is just not as feasible as maybe we wish it was. So that's one thing to consider. I will say that one way that grocers have gotten around this minimum buying requirement is by what we are calling group ordering. So one grocer may be sort of the main orderer, and then another grocer buys through them so that they can meet that minimum buying requirement. And so there are some creative solutions happening, but I just wanted to kind of set the stage with that distribution challenge being kind of at the forefront. And then the other thing is that we're starting to see some real trends in the format of grocery stores. And what we're seeing is that some rural communities are focusing on smaller layouts that have more of a priority on the higher margin items. And so what those would be is what you typically think of as sort of the perimeter of the store. So your produce, your dairy, your meat, your eggs, not so much the pantry items. And so in rural communities, that is becoming something that we're seeing more of, kind of this return to almost like a general store model, where the focus is a smaller footprint and really the focus on kind of what do you need, what are the essentials, and what could you come in, what could the store offer that you could just come in and get what you need for dinner that evening. So an example of this model has been coined as a rural fresh market. And we have some colleagues in Illinois that have done a lot of work on this. And this example is in Winchester, Illinois. This is in their sort of downtown district. And I believe the store is less than 1,000 square feet. I'd have to double check that off. I don't know that don't quote me on that, but it's a fairly small store. It used to be a shoe store, and it is, so some of that shelving is from the old shoe store. And you can see that there are some pantry items, but it's not everything. It's not paper towels, it's not pet food. It's just, what do you need to make a meal, that sort of thing, kind of baking items, some canned goods. And then they also have produce, and they also highlight that this is like the only place in I think a 30-mile radius where you can get any sort of local produce. So they're really differentiating themselves by having local food on their shelves. And then another example closer to home is a grocery store that just opened in the last year, and that is Bluestone Mercantile in Leon, Kansas. And this store is unique in a couple of ways. One way is that it's actually a store that's owned by the school district, but the store does not have a wholesaler. Instead, they are buying directly from vendors, and that means that they have a little more flexibility and can purchase from local producers. So this store, actually, the school has a farm, so some of the sourcing is coming directly from their school farm, but they also have local producers that they're purchasing from. And then I just wanted to quickly share some innovative models that we've learned about from our partners in Minnesota. And the Minnesota Extension has done a ton of work related to rural grocery stores, and they really have an expertise in sort of the farm to grocery side of things. So they have this farm to grocery toolkit, which has tons of really interesting information on sort of the strategies to use for thinking about this. And then they've also piloted this new model, which they call farm to grocery to wholesale, which is where, in this example, a garlic farmer brings their load of garlic to the grocery store. And then when the wholesaler comes to that grocery store to deliver their weekly delivery, the wholesaler then takes back that garlic and is then able to sell the garlic to other rural grocery stores from that warehouse. So that's an example of a really innovative model that some other, another Midwestern state is doing. I thought I'd share it here just to share some ideas and inspiration. This video that's linked here is great. So I highly suggest that you take a look at that after. And then I also just wanted to highlight that within K-State Research and Extension, there's kind of more and more work being done in this realm. And the local food systems transdisciplinary team is made up of a group of people from all across the K-State Research and Extension system, but it's also open to others that are interested in this work. And I believe that my colleague Tom Buller will be in a session later today talking a little more specifically about what Extension is doing related to local food systems. So we can put that information in the chat if you're interested. So that's a really quick overview of what's going on with the Rural Grocery Initiative and how we're sort of starting to work with local food systems and local producers. I've got my email and our website there, so feel free to reach out.
Okay, that's great, thanks. And Ryan can maybe chime in if I'm saying this incorrectly, but I think that that presentation is available in sort of the main area of Whova. It's down under documents. Is that right, Ryan?
I will double check. If it's not, then we'll work to get it there. So.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ryle. And now we will move on to Alice.
All right. I would first of all like to thank Ryle so much for what her presentation offered the audience, and because she has been very helpful in our endeavors to create something that is different and unusual and challenging, because it's the first of its kind in our area. There's a wealth of information out there, incredible support systems out there for people wanting to do something. And I just wanted to extend my appreciation for that. All right, so I am Alice Hill, and I have a partner, Krista Ulrich. She and I are neighbors, farm wife neighbors in the Luray, Kansas area, which is north of Russell, up in the beautiful Smoky Hill area, the post-rock country. Very lovely area to live in, a very good place to grow food in. Majority of the agricultural endeavors in this area are, of course, big commercial outfits raising commodity crops. We are truly living in a food desert here. The nearest store is Russell, which is a good 30 miles away. The nearest Walmart is almost, well, right at an hour at Hayes, or even further to go to Salina. But that's not what we want to compete with. What we are hoping to do, Krista and I, is to offer foods that are grown right in the area and served to people we get to visit with. We can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So our first year, this is year one, we actually got started the 1st of April serving our first customers. We've worked through a lot of hurdles this first winter, trying to establish what do we actually look like, what are we able to do, what are our limitations, and set up a goal for next year. So this first year, we have determined that we are classified as an indoor farmers market. We were able to purchase the equipment that you see there, the beautiful freezer and sliding door refrigerator, through the KDA's Securing Local Food Systems program. That grant came at a point that we felt was just ideal for trying to get this local food system up and running. Krista already owned the building. We can go to the next slide, please. There you go. Krista already owned this sweet little limestone building in Luray. It's on Main Street. She runs a tax office out of it, but there was enough adequate space in there that we were able to establish half of the building as our counter, and the other half she uses as her tax business. So our overhead costs were extremely low. We already had an asset there. Our first year's goal is to establish a producer and customer base. We are averaging right now about 10 to a dozen customers coming in. Most of them are elderly, retired farmers, or at least connected to the farming economy. We only have a population in our area of about 1,000. That limits, of course, our potential customer base, but we're okay with that because we're also very limited on our producer base. Currently, we have two other vendors, very sporadic and part-time. One provides eggs and the other is providing small amounts of asparagus, but we're very glad to have them, and we are working hard to generate the enthusiasm for the fact that this is an area, a way for people who are growing vegetables in their own gardens to maybe expand a little bit and bring home a little extra income while providing a service for their neighbors. We're also offering right now healthy option baked goods while we're waiting for the gardens to get rolling. This, of course, is the early season. And we're very limited as to how often we're open. It's only 2 days a week, about 1.5 hours for each time, or until we sell out, whichever comes first. We can go to the next slide. I have been passionate about growing top quality people food for 40+ years. I believe that our rural communities can and should be feeding themselves. And from what Ryle's presentation showed, there is a strong direction towards that, a strong demand for that. What you're seeing on these slides are all grown from here. The salad was put together by one of our customers from products that I had brought in. She added some beautiful peach blossoms, I think, in there, a few other flower things. She's an artist with her food. The steaks are grass-fed beef from our own place, and the squash and peppers are also from our own place. So you add a piece of bread there and away you go. You're all set for a meal. Very, very few things cannot be grown in Kansas, but we have lost that. We've lost the momentum, I guess, but I think the momentum is starting back up. All right, we can go to the next slide, please. So year 2, we hope to get a food establishment license that would allow us to retail a handful of perishable goods, things that are considered the staples, plus allow us to retail locally produced meat through the store. We would not be what you would call a typical grocery store. We don't want to compete with that. We don't want, it's just not what our image is. It does require some upgrades to Krista's building. Obviously, that's an older building with some issues that need to be dealt with before we could meet the requirements. But our goal is the spring of 2020 to have that. We are also considering, because many of our area people are elderly and infirm, to offer a pre-ordered custom delivery of groceries through the Clemma's grocery store in Russell. That keeps us within the county. It would be a public service, but that's yet to be developed fully. Next slide, please. The bigger goal is to establish a licensed community kitchen, similar to the one, I think it's in Moreland. They have one set up there that would allow adequate, that would allow all the vendors to be able to be licensed for retail sales. There's so many layers to what the legal requirements are. It's a real challenge, I think, for folks to sort through all of that. And the Rural Grocery Initiative Toolkit is very helpful in that area to help steer you in the right direction. But that would be useful for us to be able to then have foods available all year round. Many of the benefits are obviously there: job creation, value-added products would add economic benefits to the community as well. Next slide. A bigger picture is that this community at one time completely served its own needs, and I feel strongly that we can return to that on a scaled down vision of having a grain processing system, a dairy system, meat processing within the county, versus for all of us, we're having to go out of county to get our meat processed by a licensed facility. We could add the supply chain potential of utilizing local ingredients for composting, amendments for growers, recycling, a full circle concept. But I do hope that there's some young folks out there who want to take on these challenges and feel inspired to do that. Next slide, please. What that does is gives us a self-reliant community. It retains enormous food dollars within the area. It's amazing how quickly we can add to our local economy just with food dollars. Provides food security, improved health, improved financial success, and improved community cohesiveness. And one of the things that I've noticed in our month of being open, the folks come in, they stand, they visit, they share stories, they talk about the past. This morning I listened to a man who explained how he was put out for work on neighboring farms when he was in 7th grade, and the life lessons he learned from that. And it's really ties people back together again when they have that few moments to talk about their past, the local history, and to include then the youth too. We've had young boys come in and purchase things from us, which was so as unexpected. I didn't expect young folks to come in, but they came in twice actually. So my concept is that it is a rural ideal that we can be feeding our community first. We talk frequently about one Kansas farmer feeds X number of people, but what we really need to be able to say is our Kansas farmers are feeding each other, and that would be a true measure of success for our agricultural picture. Next slide, please. There you go. So growing in Kansas is not simple. It's we face a lot of challenges: high winds, hail, not enough rain, too hard a rain, heat, cold, the whole works. And so one of the things that has assisted us greatly is the creation of what I call a topless high tunnel. It's a permeable top with solid sides. It reverses the concept of the hoop house or the traditional high tunnel. It minimizes the workload. It benefits the plants. It really works well in the central states that face similar growing conditions. And it's just something that we've been very fortunate that the Russell County NRCS agent worked with us to get these going through the NRCS EQIP grant. Made a huge difference in our ability to get these going. So if anybody has any questions about those, I'd be happy to share that information. The one in the upper right corner is on Krista's property. It's a 34 by 48. The one in the lower corner, the right side, that's my smaller one, 24 by 36, and it is starting its 3rd year of production. And then the one on the far left is a 34 by 48 that's on our property, and this is its 1st year of production. So I see a question: what's the advantage of being topless? Several. The first primary thing is that it does not trap heat. And if you've ever worked with a traditional hoop house or high tunnel with roll up or drop down sides, the time spent rolling up and dropping down sides to allow for ventilation is extraordinary. It can break your back. Actually, I've been down that road. Also, it allows the heat to escape. So frequently you'll see a high tunnel with a shade cloth over the top. So you're actually adding more expense, more work to trying to moderate the temperatures in there. By having the permeable top, if we get an inch of rain, the garden gets an inch of rain. It hasn't all rolled off the sides and run down, eroding your fields. That's just the beginning of the benefits. There's many. And I think that's the last slide on my presentation.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much. We will move on now to Rachel.
Hi, good morning. While I dance with my electronics, I was hoping if I could have folks put in the chat what their role is. You know, I'll let you guys kind of self-identify because I know many people have many different roles, but grocer, nonprofit, farmer, I would just love to see what folks are in the audience. Okay. All right, let's see now. And what are you guys seeing? I might have to swap my screens.
We are seeing the slide, and I think the next slide.
Okay.
Also.
I had to click swap displays on.
Yep. How about now?
Great. Thank you.
Okay. And nothing else is in the way?
Nope, you're great.
I should start turning things off on my computer, but I just have a million things up. I'm sure you guys understand. I'm Rachel McGinnis-Millsap. I work with KC Healthy Kids as the Farm to Institution Director, and I'm happy to see some familiar names on the participant list and really excited that this event is still happening, even though it looks different this year. So super happy to be here. I am presenting on a little bit different of a topic this time around, so I'll do my best to keep it short, even though I know, like many of you guys, we could talk for hours about this. And let's see. So just as a quick background for KC Healthy Kids, we work with the health and well-being of children and families, and we really try to work with community-driven initiatives and advocacy, and we focus on where people live, learn, work, and play. So that's a pretty broad stroke. My department is in local food, and so I'll be keeping it close to just what we do in our local food programs today and talking about some of our projects and overall strong partnerships that we have. But I will also be talking through a little bit of our good food policy, because that definitely impacts the two states that we border. We work in both Kansas and Missouri. And so we have lots of great resources for the whole state of Kansas that are really policy focused. So for our local food, we believe that kids and communities need a strong local food system, and we help farmers grow thriving businesses and teach kids and families the value of growing their own food and purchasing local food. So what that means is that we are really able to work with a majority of the local food system and figure out where and what our place and role is in that. And I'm going to take us back. Many of you guys, well, maybe not many, but a few of you guys that are on the participant list may have been sitting at the table in 2013. That is when discussion of a Kansas City food hub began in this area. Many years before that, I'm sure there was talks about it, but this is when it was really formalized. And many of the same partners that were in the mix for that, Lincoln University, MU Extension, K-State Research and Extension, Supply Chain Networking, Fresh Food Express, KC Food Circle, Good Natured Family Farms, After the Harvest, a couple of the school districts in the area, Independence and KC Mo, and as well as Cultivate KC are still in the mix and really working towards local food system work today. I will be talking a little bit about what our partnerships have looked like with the Food Hub that is in fact in KC now. The KC Food Hub has been created, and they did pull a lot of information from this feasibility study. So if you haven't read this, I encourage you guys to. It's really good information for how the KC Food Hub really came about. So dialing it back to KC Healthy Kids, our programs and partnerships are really influential to what our work is. We are acting as the National Farm to School Network Kansas kind of partner for them. So any questions or overall policy and gardening stuff, we try to help with statewide partnerships that way. We have our Farm to School Academy that's been around for prior to when I was with KC Healthy Kids 6 years ago, which works with school districts and helps them to identify procurement possibilities and really to tap into what the possibilities are for getting local food into their districts and menus. The reason I talk about our schools is they were a really valuable stepping stone into helping work with farmers to identify what needed to be done to get food into institutions that needed more food than they were able to provide. So things like the Food Hub are absolutely important for aggregating that food to some of our bigger districts that have 27,000 people that they're trying to feed. So similar to our grocery stores that struggle with, weekly purchases or wholesale amounts, schools are working under parameters like that as well. We have really powerful partnerships that are current, and I will not name them all, but some of our specific partners with some of the projects I'm going to be mentioning are West Central Community Action Agency, MU Extension, KC Food Hub, Cultivate KC, Community Housing of Wyandotte County, K-State Extension, and many more. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking through what happened with our schools and early care centers over the last year, right? And we talked about this a little bit previously, but people were having trouble finding food in grocery stores, and there were limitations on how much milk you could buy, or there were just shortages of stuff. So we found out early on that our directors and people that were purchasing food for our early care and education partners, they needed help finding produce. So what we want is not only for communities and families to have access to healthy food, we want it to be local as much as possible. So we were able to pair our ECEs with folks that could deliver and give neighborhood boxes or mimic CSAs in our ECEs so that families could pick it up on site and that schools and ECEs could incorporate it into their lunchroom. So that was one thing we noticed and that we were able to adapt and change. It was kind of the other side of stuff. A lot of our policy work, which we'll talk about later, has worked with groceries to help with policies that incorporate certain things. This was the other side of it, where it was helping the community find their food when the groceries were struggling with keeping it stocked. Okay, this is just a cute picture of kids taking produce into the school. We also operate a split log farm, and a lot of the groundwork that we're trying to lay for working with our institutions involves teaching people about food safety and teaching people about how to procure local food, which this is a very unique situation. They're pulling it up and taking it across from their school. But there's also a fair amount of training that needs to be done in school districts and ECEs for people to incorporate that food. So if they're going to have, somebody deliver a wholesale amount of food, how are they going to process it and what are the limitations there? So this particular school doesn't even have a triple sink, so they aren't able to prepare produce on site. It has to be done in a central kitchen. So one of the solutions to that was to put a washing station in across the street. So the food comes in, it's ready to go. All they have to do is throw it out or add it to their salad. And the biggest thing too with some of our work is just creating local food advocates at an early age and exposing them to local food. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the wholesale mindset of this. So this is where that grocery and food hub involvement comes into place. Our biggest push and priority right now is trying to get local food buyers and growers in the same space and having resources and activities that help to, one, increase the demand for local food at a community level, but also to make it easier for our big buyers to purchase from our big growers or the aggregation of our growers. So that's where that food hub is so important. And, even at our ECEs where they maybe have 60 kids and they don't need to go and aggregate food, maybe going to a farmer's market or a grocery store to get that food is their best bet. Providing people those resources to buy local food is equally as important as trying to increase that demand for wholesale purchasing. These are some of the specific programs that I'm going to talk about. Kansas City Food Circle has been around for years and years, and just in the last couple of years, we have taken it over at KCLD Kids. We were able to do an Eat Local and Organic virtual expo this year, which I'll talk a little bit more in depth about later. It is something where farmers are members and it's sustainable practices. There's very specific guidelines, and we have kept all of those. For those of you that have knowledge of the Food Circle, we haven't changed any of the membership guidelines as of yet. We're still trying to secure funding and do all the fun stuff that we know that our farmers want, and we'll be reaching out to our farmers that are members this year. About 30, I think over 35 have signed on to be members for another year, and we're able to spotlight them in different ways and try to encourage folks to go through them or buyers to purchase from them. The expo that I mentioned, we just got done hosting it. It was a month long, it was a goal to support local food in the community and show people where to go, but also to spotlight all of the hard work that our farmers have done and our partners, and being able to adapt and being able to survive in the last year. Our farmers, a lot of them, and I say our farmers, a lot of the farmers we work with have done an amazing job of adapting to online ordering. So that impacts the wholesale involvement. It impacts people being able to order CSAs through them. So what we wanted to do is just keep that in the forefront of people's minds and try to share with them how they can keep purchasing from them. A year ago, it was very crisis focused, and we've come out of that a little bit, but we still want to tap into that let's keep this in the forefront, keep that momentum going. Let's buy out all of our farmers' produce before we're going, elsewhere for it. Okay, another project and this one is very much involved in the partners that I mentioned. It's a multiple year project, and some of you guys on the line may be involved with this or have heard of it, but Beginning Farmer Wholesale Project is something that is focusing on farmers that are less than 10 years in operation. As you guys know, our farmers are aging out, and yes, we want to create local food advocates and farmers from an early age, but it's our beginning farmers that we really want to help, you know, diversify their business or be able to put them in the same space to talk to a mentor that has been doing it for years and years. Katie Nixon is very involved with this with West Central Community Action Agency. She's, you know, over a lot of big federal grants right now. And this one is something that is really helpful to our beginning growers. One-on-one technical assistance, online education. We've done in-person stuff before the pandemic, and then wholesale workshops will still continue to be implemented in certain ways. And also demystifying the wholesale market manual and a video series are coming soon. So one of our main goals in the project from KCLT Kids is creating a map that helps people connect. So, and this might be the best resource we have programmatically right now for our buyers and our grocers and nonprofits and food hub stuff that is being implemented in the community. Is we wanted to have a space where different layers of the food system are represented, and the whole kind of local food shed mapping can be in one spot. We are diverse in the way that we serve both sides of the state line. So we don't want this map to take the place of anything that's out there. We want it just to be a regional outlook of what our food system looks like, with the main priority being that maybe this can connect local food buyers and growers in some capacity. You know, if you're able to ask questions from schools or districts or institutions that are purchasing local food and go right to the website from this, that's what we want. We did just launch this. It was kind of in conjunction with our local food expo, and we've been talking about it for a long time. And this is something we will be talking through more in the next month or two to get people up there on different layers. Right now, it's farms, restaurants, grocery stores. There's our nonprofit partners are on there that are actually funded through the project, but that's not, we don't want to limit it to that. We want anybody that's involved with the local food system and has resources on there to be engaged in some way. There are certain forms that we want people to fill out to be able to kind of share their story on this, because that was one of the biggest things, was getting people in the same space. And that was kind of taken away from us in the last year, but we're still working towards that. And then sharing people's stories that have had impact in local food and increasing the amount of wholesale local food purchases. All right, so I talked a little bit about our CSA program. KCLT Kids is really lucky to have a partnership with Split Log Farm. And this is an urban farm located in KCK. It's something where we operate for, mostly it's been educational in nature, but just in the last year or so, we've pivoted and just grown a lot of food and tried to disperse them in the community, because that's what needed to happen. With schools being closed, we weren't able to give it to the school lunchrooms anymore. So we really are, our farm manager out there, Ashley Meek, and our farmer, Tracy Flowers, have been growing so much food for the community. And it's really a great opportunity that can mimic that wholesale integration. So if we can provide food that's free from the farm for families or for the schools, then that mimics what it will look like with those relationships they can go and get into with farmers later. Okay, any questions? I've lost my chat box, you guys. So like I said, yeah, put them in the chat box, and I have not been paying attention since the beginning. We're gonna switch to policy right now, and this is a bit broader. I feel like I'm staying good on time. This is another thing that, man, I could talk all day about. Good food policy is one of our 5 pillars at Healthy Kids. And some of these things are ongoing, and some of these things are things that have been done in the past. The Kansas Alliance for Wellness is a statewide network of local food and farm policy councils that advocate for local, state, and national policies. That is ongoing. It really works to help get access to more equitable food and affordable food. The Greater KC Food Policy Coalition is something that is also still ongoing. It is there to strengthen the regional food system and provide healthy and affordable food for everyone in the Greater Kansas City area. The coalition includes grass top leaders from critical food systems, and all different places from just regional outlook. So those are ongoing. Fair food shopping is something that helps folks kind of maneuver through transportation to access local and healthy food, well, healthy and affordable food. Local if there's options there. And the Greater Kansas City Food Policy Coalition is working with representatives from the local transportation agencies to improve grocery shopping by bus. So this helps people in the KC area and beyond identify the best way to shop for healthy and fresh food on the bus system and keep it minimal as far as cost. And then many of you might be aware of the Kansas sales tax on food. That was something that over the last few years was really a fight that KC Healthy Kids was spearheading, and then fresh food financing. So, lots of stuff going on. We do work at all levels in the community system, which is difficult to talk through all in one 15-minute setting, but really we're just trying to generate local food eaters and encourage kids and their families to speak up about the communities that they live in. Of course, we encourage shopping local, and we do value that we can create change and create programming that helps kids to see both the solutions and the limitations in their community and help each other out. I mean, that's what it's all about. And we do pull a lot of data and research into this. Our partners have such strengths in compiling research and the academia side of things. So I will end there and say thank you for listening. If there's any questions, I think we're rolling into that now, but thank you for listening.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Rachel. We'll open up to questions from all three of the speakers, or for all three of the speakers. And you can put questions into the chat box if you want, and we'll monitor those. And also, if you want, if you go down to the bottom of the screen, there's a little smiley face that says reactions. And if you click on that, there's a raise your hand option. You could do that, or just put your hand up. I'm more than happy for people to unmute and ask questions.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm wondering how the pandemic has affected rural grocery, and has it helped build that up, or have we seen any closures? Is it hurting rural grocery stores?
That's a great question, and one that we, at least this time last year, we're really trying to get a handle on. I think some of the things that others have mentioned were true. There were a lot of difficulties in maintaining inventory at rural grocery stores. Rural grocery stores felt like they were getting sort of the short end of the deal in terms of being kind of last on the list to get things back in stock. But there were definitely more people shopping at the rural stores, partly because people were not working, so they weren't traveling out of town. It wasn't convenient to work. It wasn't convenient to go to grocery shopping on the way home from work. So the grocery store really was closest to them. Two, some residents weren't interested in going into bigger cities or bigger towns and bigger stores to shop, so that was keeping them home. Three, restaurants really weren't open, so people were just buying more groceries. So all of that combined, there was definitely, it was a good year for grocers in terms of sales. However, it was difficult, and it was sort of nonstop. It was a lot of sort of flying by the seat of your pants, policies changing kind of all the time, internal to the store and outside of the store. We knew of a couple stores that completely closed their doors and only did online or telephone orders. We had other stores that stayed open but had sort of requirements for when people could come in or how many people could come in. We saw a lot of priority shopping hours earlier in the morning. So that's a lot. There was a lot going on, but generally it seems like rural grocery stores did fairly well, considering the challenges they were facing. We, on the top of my head, I don't think that there were stores that closed last year. I do think there are owners this year thinking, wow, that was exhausting. And so we've heard of some grocers more recently that have said that year, the COVID year, has actually sort of pushed them out the door a little bit. And so that's why some of the transition planning work we're doing is so timely, because we've been able to connect with grocers that are starting to think about retirement and help them create a plan.
Raul, do you think that people forced to stay home who shopped at local grocery stores will continue to shop there? Do you think that those rural groceries will be able to retain those shoppers as we come out of the pandemic?
I think that's the question that's still yet to be answered. It seems like a few grocers have kind of gone back, have started just now. They're just now starting to see a return to the sales that they had pre-pandemic. So they're starting to see shopping go back outside of town. And I think that's not across the board. I do think that's contributing potentially to some of this exhaustion that seeing shoppers maybe go outside of town is hard to see after having them shop at their stores. But I'm hopeful that that's not across the board. I'm hopeful that there are community members that are seeing what a resource, what a important venue the grocery store is, and what an important community member the grocery store was for them this last year. So I'm hopeful that this last year sort of helped raise awareness about that and helped to shift some shopping patterns.
Ryle, this is Debbie Bearden. May I add that one of the
Absolutely.
things in response to her question, curbside service for those who have been cautious to get into public places, along with delivery service to from the grocery to their door, I think have demonstrated that those local grocery stores want to serve the community and that they're willing to do that at no cost or minimal fees for those kind of things to help their community members.
Yeah, I think just to quickly respond to what Debbie said, that I think actually there were a lot of grocery stores that were doing some type of delivery before the pandemic. It was a little bit under the radar. It was like, if someone needs it, grocers are going to do that for you because they're part of the community. One thing that has been something that grocers have maybe had some challenges with has been adding on online shopping. And so we have been working on an e-commerce fact sheet to help grocers navigate that process. All I can say is it's complicated, and for a grocer to have to do all of the groundwork that I know our team has done this year, I'm hopeful that that will help some grocers get into that space and be able to do it in an efficient way. We definitely saw grocers taking online orders, but it was sort of in a makeshift kind of ad hoc format. So the hope is that this e-commerce side of things could really help bring in some more sales for grocers.
Rachel, thank you so much, Ryle. Rachel, Ryan had a question. How far out from the KC metro area are the producers and the groceries and restaurants that are on the map?
So the map is set to encompass 250 miles, and we're starting in the greater KC area and figuring out how we want to use the rest. So our producers, for sure, producers and farmers, it's that 250 mile radius. And we're planning and talking through what would be the benefit of having, like, focusing on other areas next to capture what's going on. We'll welcome anybody and everybody that wants to put themselves on there. All it is a Google form that we're having folks fill out annually. So it's up to those that want to participate if they feel like it's valuable enough. It's called the Eat Local KC map. So that does kind of get in the way, even though we are focusing on regional. But if we get, let's say, bigger and badder in the future, it might not be called that. We're still figuring out the big picture. But anybody that wants to put themselves on there to have it and encourage people to find them. I mean, we're just trying to get more people in the know of where to go find local food. So. Okay,
that's great. And then I was wondering too, along with Christina's question to Alice, how did the pandemic year, how did that impact you? And Rachel kind of mentioned that in her presentation, but I was wondering how that hit you.
Well, we really weren't established at all yet, but in some respects, the grant opportunities that opened up because of COVID gave us this foundation to begin our work. You know, I guess for every bad thing that happens, there's good things that come out of it. And we saw an opportunity to utilize the crisis to handle something that was really a chronic problem. And I'm hoping that we're able to maintain that momentum and utilize further grant opportunities and encourage other small communities to do something very, very similar. So now I do know that for the local people going to Russell to go to the grocery store, those shelves were empty. A lot of the shelves were empty. And of course, the toilet paper shortage, all of those things were impacting people all across the country. But as you say, the smaller stores, I think they got hit harder than maybe the larger places.
Thanks. All right, who else has a question? No. Well, I might, we had some questions that we thought we might think about if there was time. So I was wondering, sort of in thinking about our keynote presentation and Brett asking sort of how we, you know, what food world and, you know, community world we envision going forward. What thoughts do you all, you know, what vision do you all see sort of for going forward, and some good positive directions that we can head? Anyone want to jump in?
I can jump in, sure. Yeah, so I feel like I was really excited to join this conversation today because I, when I was in college, I studied food systems, and then after college worked actually for a dining program and worked on a lot of local food sourcing for that dining services program. And so talking about sort of getting local food into institutions, into grocery stores, is really something that I've been sort of circling for years based on sort of my interest. And the work that we've seen in sort of other states that have done like what I shared in Minnesota, I think is really inspiring, just a really creative way of thinking about how to connect those dots. And so I really think that there's a lot of room for partnering between local producers and some of the rural businesses in Kansas communities. I think Alice has an excellent vision for sort of reclaiming what used to be. And I think that we're seeing that with grocery stores that are taking on sort of this smaller footprint and just focusing on really the essentials. And in many ways, those are things that you could source locally. And so I think that there's just a lot of work that can be done. And I think I'm excited to see kind of how this momentum continues to move forward.
Excellent. That's great. Thanks. We got a question in the chat. Allison is wondering about the role of wholesale distributors and how they can be more supportive of smaller groceries.
So, so I think if we sort of step back just a little bit and set the stage, the grocery industry is a challenging one, and it has only gotten more challenging over the years, it seems. The profit margins really are not very high, but the consequences of not having a grocery store in communities are massive. Health benefits are lost, economic benefits are lost, and just sort of community viability and vibrancy kind of goes out the door. But the wholesale world has also been squeezed over the years. And so it used to be that there were many options for distribution in rural communities, and that has just more and more gotten consolidated. And so if you look around now, there are really only a handful of grocery wholesalers that work in the state. And that makes it difficult for those few distributors to make the dollars and cents work for smaller communities. And that's really like they're able to kind of pick and choose the size of the store that they work with. So I don't know for sure what are the ways to encourage a distributor to enter back into some of those really small towns, but I am excited about one project we've been working on with a computer science group at K-State, and they are helping us develop a map that would show sort of where there's excess capacity at rural grocery stores. So is there a rural grocery store that's sort of just barely making that minimum requirement every week? And is there another store nearby that they could work together and do some of that group ordering? So that's one thing that we're working on to sort of address that challenge. And we're hoping that could at least help facilitate some relationships. And as I was thinking about this topic, I also thought, well, could that be something that's available for producers to be aware of? And so, producers could also participate in that sort of group ordering or group dynamic, maybe not through the wholesaler, but within the grocers. So I think there's some opportunities to sort of self-organize. And I just saw that Debbie mentioned their store in Moran, Kansas is ordering for 4 other stores. So I think that can be an effective way to address that challenge.
All right, our question for panelists. Yeah, Allison.
Hi. I don't know how to make that hand go away, but I several years ago was a natural food broker, and I worked with co-ops all over the western half of the nation. And a lot of them were disappearing for the very same reasons that we're seeing with the grocers, the small rural grocers. And I wonder how much those co-ops are even on the radar right now for any of this type of conversation.
Well, we've got Debbie on the call, who is one of our co-op grocers in the state. But I will just say that the webinar series we just concluded that I mentioned earlier had a focus on sharing some details about alternative ownership models for grocery stores, cooperatives being one of them. So it is something on our radar that in communities where sort of the traditional means of selling a business, bringing on another private business owner, or having the business be sold to another company, that's sort of the traditional model, but it's not necessarily happening as readily in our rural communities. And so the options for ownership models are one thing we really are trying to share. And so cooperatives, school-run groceries, like I mentioned, there are a couple really unique partnerships between cities and businesses, or cities actually just owning and operating the business. So those are things that when a sort of the traditional model doesn't work, thinking about alternatives so that the store doesn't close and so that there is still access to food in that community is something we're really pushing.
All right, do we have maybe one more question before we move on? Or would any of the three of you like to, add anything after we've sort of been through the session? Do you have any sort of parting thoughts?
This is Alice. I might like to encourage the families and people who are in very rural, and that's an interesting term. I looked up the actual definition for it, and for places like Luray, we're not even categorized really under rural anymore. We are non-core, non-something. Anyway, basically we are non. And knowing that people around here count very importantly to the economics of Kansas, economics of the United States, I'd like to think we are not non. But what I would like to say is that if we can think small, if we can, and not use small in a negative term, but if we can scale down to fit our own communities versus the metropolitan areas, the larger urban areas, if we can think of ourselves as viable for ourselves, that'll have a ripple effect from town to town to town and could make an enormous impact in our communities. We called our market Step Back in Time because, as was mentioned earlier, most of our communities did support themselves at one time. They not only fed themselves, they also exported food. And we've lost that so much, but I think it can be regained. And I think that the momentum is really, really there. So events like this really prove that. So thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for sharing all this wonderful information, and for everybody who attended and for the great questions.